I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside, it's so comfortable, and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off road. The guy managed the group. He was like, "What are you doing in this beautiful car?" I'm like, "I'm going off road." He's like, "Are you sure? Because you can use one of ours." And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, no, we're going to do this. And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability as well as its robust interior are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender. Sometimes it takes a different approach to help you unlock your true potential. Capella University's game-changing FlexPath format helps you learn at your own pace and fit earning a degree into your life. From before you enroll to after you graduate, you'll be supported by people who are invested in your success so you can pursue your goals knowing that help is available if you need it. Imagine your future differently at capella.edu.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show. Today on the James Altucher Show.
Welcome to part 2. Part 1 was also available today, and in part 1, we talked about what are all the uses for Bitcoin, why Bitcoin. And in part 2, we talk about DeFi, NFTs, securitized tokens, all the business models on top of crypto. But perhaps most importantly, what are the next milestones that are going to drive crypto higher? Here we go. What I want to start talking about is these new, I'll say relatively new uses of crypto, which are amazing. So whereas Bitcoin was designed to potentially replace currency, which is there's, let's say, $40 trillion worth of currency around the world, this new thing, DeFi tokens, is intended to replace Wall Street and banking. So there's 1.3 quadrillion derivatives and investments and so on throughout the world. So it could be a much larger market. A lot of these DeFi cryptocurrencies are built on top of a currency like Ethereum, but there's also, like you mentioned, Solana, Polkadot, Cardano. But let's talk about DeFi in general. So, and again, decentralized finance, what that means is instead of me calling up my bank and then say, hey, where's the brokerage firm? I want to buy some Apple stock. He calls the stock exchange. They trade a little on the stock exchange. There's market makers and dark pools and so on in the middle. There's fees every step of the way. There's possibility of human error every step of the way, and so on. Decentralized finance allows these transactions theoretically to happen much more seamlessly, more quickly, no chance of fraud, no extra layers of fees. It happens right away, 24 hours a day, and on and on and on. There's all these huge benefits. And so this is just beginning. And it's very complicated, a lot of it. So I don't want to explain everything, but what do you see happening in that space?
So I think that there's a couple of views that I have of this that's probably different than some others. So one is, I think you have to start every conversation of decentralized finance with the recognition that Bitcoin was the creator of this entire decentralized finance space, right? It's decentralized money. And the reason why I say that is because most people, when they hear DeFi, they immediately jump to the financial services, lending, exchanges, et cetera. But we have to remember finance is made up of stocks, bonds, currencies, and commodities, plus then all of the financial services on top of it. And so we kind of build from that base. First, you got to get the assets of stocks, bonds, currencies, and commodities. And then you go and you get the financial services that allow you to interact with or trade those assets. That gives you kind of a total view of finance.
Good point.
So when you come to the decentralized finance world, what we need decentralized assets, right? So Bitcoin being a decentralized currency, and then eventually we're going to need the other things. And then you're going to need the decentralized financial services. Now, when people say decentralized financial services specifically, so forget the assets for a second, the decentralized financial services, what I always go back to is, what are we really talking about? Like, let's zoom out, get out of kind of the Bitcoin to the crypto world. We're just talking about automation. If you remove middlemen, you're going to use software to automate these transactions. So a simple smart contract simply says, okay, James is going to send me the deed to his home, and I'm going to send him money in exchange for it. And in the legacy world, when we go to make that transaction, I literally take the money, I put it in escrow, you take the deed, you basically put that in escrow, then the escrow agent like switches, and we have like a third party, we have lawyers, we have paper contracts, like we have all these different components, all to allow you and I to do a transaction where we trust each other. And then you and I both have to trust each other in the transaction by using these intermediaries, but then we also have to trust that the intermediaries are going to do what they say they're going to do. And there's obviously law and punishment and kind of all this stuff that reinforces that system. Well, what we're talking about here is literally just using software to now replace all that nonsense. You and I enter into a smart contract and the code executes for us. And the code executes in an automatic fashion that allows for you to give me the asset that I want and me to give you the money that you want. And so if you really think about that from kind of a first principle standpoint, it's just automation. That's all this is. Now, is it decentralized? Is it centralized? What assets? What financial services? Who builds them? Who owns them? What's the regulatory regime? Like, you can very quickly get into the weeds. But if you think about it just as automated finance, I'm very hard pressed to find somebody who doesn't believe the finance industry is going to become more automated over time.
By the way, a simple example you use one is real estate, but also a will could be built into a smart contract, whether it's Bitcoin, Ethereum, or one of these DeFi tokens. I can make a will, and it's not like you don't really need a lawyer. You don't need a judge to approve it. Nobody can sue later and say, oh, he was mentally unstable and he wrote that. Like, it just is what it is. You can't break it's a smart contract. You can't break it. So it's going to happen whether you were mentally unstable or not.
It's an if-then statement. And I think part of what we have to remember is go back again to the legacy world, right? Stock traders, humans, used to literally bid and ask, open outcry method on the stock exchange floor. They have all, for the most part, been replaced by computers that execute software that look at, if this happens, then take this trading action at its most basic form. And so in some crazy way, the quote unquote smart contract, which is a terminology that was kind of popularized by Nick Szabo, is already in place in the legacy finance world. We don't call them smart contracts, but we do think of it as high frequency trading has replaced the human. And so now what we're watching is the proliferation of that across the rest of the finance industry. Now, there's a ton of debate, even to the level of controversy around what platform does it happen on, what are the assets, who owns it, regulatory regime, et cetera. I tend to almost think that all of those individual details, if you're an investor, will make a good investment great. But as long as you're allocated to the right industry and you're smart about the way that you allocate in terms of buying infrastructure and taking more of kind of a broad-based view, you're much, much more likely to end up being successful than being completely outside of the industry, right? Good market, or a good team meets bad market, market wins. Bad team meets good market, market wins. And so ultimately what you're doing here is doing market selection. And if you can wrap your head around the idea that all of this automation is coming to the world, then you've kind of checked the first box. The second thing and most important part of this analysis, in my opinion, is in order to get automation, you have to have the assets be digitized. So if I wanted to, let's say, use physical cash, the analog asset, in the current financial world, it's really hard. I can't mail dollars to the stock market. I can't mail dollars, for the most part, in any size to do a transaction. I have to use electronic QSIP money. So analog dollars don't fit in the legacy system. What we now are watching is that the electronic QSIP dollars do not fit into this new digital financial system that's being built. It's like trying to take a cassette tape and put it into a CD-ROM player, or try to take a CD-ROM and put it into iTunes. It doesn't work, right? It's incompatible technology.
Yeah, how does digital fiat currency not work in the new system?
Well, so what we have right now is not digital fiat currency. We have electronic CUSIP dollars. Electronic CUSIP dollars are simple files that are held in centralized databases that actually are only settled up at the end of every day, or every other day. So what ends up happening is you have to upgrade the technology to actually be truly digital. So if you look at something like a USDC, right, which is a stable coin, USDC cannot actually be integrated in its current form into the legacy payment systems. Why? They have to build technology for the new digital payment rails. But those legacy payment systems also cannot take their electronic CUSIP dollars and send them through the USDC rails either. So it's just like taking physical dollars can't operate in an electronic world. The electronic dollars can't operate in this truly digital world where you have these kind of open systems. And so what I think we're watching play out here is not only Bitcoin in terms of being built as this decentralized digital currency, but also people are waking up to, wait a minute, there's this whole automation that is coming, and it's because now the assets are going to be digitized, truly digital, not electronic CUSIP, which is a representation of the asset, but they're actually going to be digital. And so does that happen on Bitcoin as kind of a layer 2, layer 3? Maybe. Does that happen somewhere else? Maybe. That's what the market's going to decide. But I think my big focus and what I try to get through to people is we're talking about automation, and that automation is now possible because we have digital assets, truly digital bearer assets. And then 2 is we have the ability to now, in a very significant way, write smart contracts that are going to automate a lot of this. And what we've seen is smart contracts were pioneered in its kind of current form in this crypto world on Ethereum. It's now spread kind of out on that long tail to all these other smart contract platforms. But also now we're starting to see smart contracts on Bitcoin as well. And so ultimately what I think is a very unpopular opinion, we're going to end up seeing a lot of feature parity across these platforms. And so what I get most excited about is, well, if we have feature parity, if we have assets that can be automated, if we have assets that can be digital, if we have smart contracts on a bunch of different platforms, well, I actually think one of the most important differentiators is who's actually decentralized and who's not. And that's where I spend a majority of my time on Bitcoin and Bitcoin alone, is because what I found is that Bitcoin is actually the only one that is truly decentralized and continues to have an economic incentive to become more and more decentralized, where I think a lot of the other ones are going to become centralized. Centralization is not bad. It's just different. And so I think that what you're seeing is that bifurcation around one pursuing decentralization, other things pursuing efficiency.
I like this idea, though, of I haven't really thought of it as automation, but you're really correct that we're replacing legacy systems, which is bogged down by non-automation. There's people involved, there's potential for error, there's all sorts of steps involved, and we're automating that. And crypto in general, whether it's Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever, it's kind of the platform for automating it. There's one more step in that, which is that it's also you standardizing all of these things so that they could be traded with each other. So I could have a token that helps me automate, let's say cloud storage, and I could trade it for a token that helps me trade stocks. Like there's this interesting layer on top of it, which allows it turns automation into an asset. And I find that to be very interesting. So for instance, I could create a cryptocurrency out of my house. If I own a house, I could say, okay, I'm going to create a cryptocurrency that it represents 10% ownership of my house. And I could start selling it to people. And so anybody who has a token has a smart contract which says they own a tiny piece of my house. But they can now trade this for someone who tokenizes, I don't know, their future royalty earnings on their music albums. So there's not only automation, but this tokenization aspect creates an infinite number of business models.
Yeah, I think that ultimately what we're going to watch is we're going to watch the automation of all industries. And what it ends up being is it's going to come back to what industries need to be decentralized, what industries don't need to be decentralized. And what the world is going to rediscover is that majority of industries don't need to be decentralized. right? Like, if you really think about what is the importance of decentralization, well, it's really just about security. And so if you can get automation and get efficiency with a centralized system, I actually think most people are going to choose to have a centralized, efficient, automated system.
What do you think industry will be like that?
Look at what we're watching with NFTs right now. I think that there's going to be multiple variations of NFTs. The initial version of just taking art and making it digital, for the most part, there's very few examples I can think of where you need to have decentralized infrastructure for art, right? And so what ends up happening is if you actually can get lower fees, higher throughput, and you can become a more efficient system by simply taking the idea of art and putting it into the digital realm, and people know that that's actually the original and there's trusted parties that do it, I think people are going to be fine with that. And you see that with, let's say, developers moving from Ethereum to Binance Smart Chain to build. There's a bunch of developers, they don't care about decentralization. They just want the lowest fees and they want the highest throughput. That's not everybody, but that is a big portion of people, a bigger portion than I think the market is assigning.
So, but it's interesting though. Like, I didn't know much about NFTs, and I've recently done a deep dive into it. There's all these aspects of NFTs beyond the art world. Like, I feel like the art world is ultimately going to be a small application for NFTs, and
Agreed.
I think of an NFT almost like a ticket. So, a good NFT now is not just artwork, but maybe it unleashes some utility for me once I buy it. So I not only have the art, but in a very simple case, I could have a conversation with the original artist. Or, the New York Knicks could sell an NFT of their tickets, and that's the only way to have tickets. And this way that avoids scalpers or, whatever, or forged tickets or whatever. So it seems like it could start moving, definitely trustworthiness is important. And I don't know if centralization is important. I never really understand that, but this automated aspect becomes important. And yes, speed and efficiency becomes important. But what's attracting to you to NFTs beyond art?
To me, I think that the whole idea of all of this stuff is the alignment of economic incentives. So I'll give you a perfect example. Let's say that a professional sports team says to themselves, we sell tickets and we make money on the primary sale. I sold James a $100 ticket and I make $100 when I do that. James then turns around and he sells it to somebody for $200 as kind of a secondary market transaction. And then that person then sells it for $500. So now there has been a total $100 primary sale plus $700 of secondary sale. So $800 total. I only made $100 off of that though. So what if all of a sudden now, every time that this ticket trades hands in the secondary market, I actually get a piece of it?
Yeah, it's incredibly valuable.
That'd be pretty cool,
Yeah.
right? Now, do I need it to be decentralized? Probably not, right? And there may be a lot of reasons why I actually don't want it to be decentralized. I want to make sure I have control, that I can make sure that I'm still getting paid, like all these different things. And so I think that's a good example where people are realizing that there's technology that is now available to more align economic incentive, because now the team's going to encourage the secondary market. Historically, they've been against the secondary market. They don't like it. They can't make money off of it.
Yeah.
But now if they can make money, they actually want you to flip that ticket as many times as possible because they're making money on every transaction. But I think that, again, it goes back to this idea of when do we need decentralization and when do we not? For sure, the market has decided that for a digital, decentralized global currency, decentralization is the most important thing. Bitcoin's $1 trillion asset. I think it's very hard to argue against. What I think the market's trying to figure out on all this other stuff is like, where else do we need it? And if we do need decentralization for another use case, do we build it on top of the most decentralized layer one Bitcoin, or do we go build it somewhere else? And I think that everyone has their own opinion as you kind of think through that problem. But ultimately, the market's going to decide. It doesn't matter what my personal opinion is or anybody else's. The market's going to decide the things that need decentralization. Is it going to be built on top of Bitcoin, or does it get built somewhere else?
I would argue the ideal would be decentralization combined with efficiency and low fees. Because look at your experience with YouTube. You don't want any one centralized, like look at media in general. Nobody wants one centralized source to control their ability to spread their message. So decentralization in that case is important. Or if I make a will, for instance, on top of a smart contract, I don't want a centralized authority to have a system of judges to say my will is not valid. So decentralization is important there. Like I can't think of too many things where yes, I'll sacrifice decentralization for speed and low fees, but if I can have all three, that's pretty cool. I'd rather have that. I can't think of any industry really where I wouldn't want that.
I absolutely agree that there is a desire to have all three. I think the big question is just, is it actually possible? Right? Is it possible to get something that's decentralized and efficient? What we're watching is, and I think that it is possible, something like the Lightning Network, right? Which to me is one of the most innovative pieces of technology in the world right now. If you look at what the Lightning Network has done, is it has figured out a way to have complete efficiency, super fast final settlement of actual value, done for essentially zero. So instantaneous payments done for zero, but it is built on top of the layer one security of Bitcoin. So you get decentralized security, plus you get on layer two scalability around the throughput and the fees. And so I think now what we're watching is these other platforms are trying to copy that idea of scaling on the layer twos. Some of them will be successful, some of them won't. But ultimately, I think that's where you get the kind of integration, right? Or you get kind of all three, is you can get different layers where you get different value propositions, and then you have them vertically integrated. And so you as the end user using a layer two, you're getting efficiency of layer two and scalability of layer two, but you're using layer one security at the same time. And that's kind of the holy grail historically, is how do you accomplish that? And that again goes back to this idea that this is a computer science breakthrough. Right? It's 40 years of work that went into actually being able to solve these problems. And now we've exploded into a multi-trillion-dollar market because of those breakthroughs.
These days, we're all investors, trying to be smart with our money despite our worst impulses. But at iShares, we believe that deep down inside of every investor is a better investor. One that's just waiting to be let out. Explore iShares ETFs and insights and let your best investor out. Visit iShares.com for more information.
You know what I love about fantasy sports is that even though I'm not going to be a great basketball player or a baseball player or a football player or whatever, I feel like I get to participate and make decisions and use my knowledge of these different leagues or these different sports to compete. So it's like I can pick my team or I can pick my favorite players, and I could use my knowledge to make predictions and maybe even make money. So with the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League on Prize Picks. This is a league created specifically for combo projections that include two or more players from different sports or leagues. Want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz, who's also been a guest on this podcast, and I've been a guest on his? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries for some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Look, Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. What? So, I love playing it. I love anywhere where I can use analytical ability with my interests to demonstrate some skill and maybe make some money. And I like the game-like aspect. I do wish they had chess as a category on prizepicks.com, but I'll settle for what they've got. Maybe I should make my own fantasy chess league. But in any case, I love Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/James. Use code James for a first deposit match up to $100. That's the easiest $100 you're ever going to make. So that's prizepicks.com/James and use code James. Daily fantasy sports made easy. The future of learning is definitely online. Like, it's such BS that you have to spend $200,000 or take $200,000 in loans and go to some fancy school when it's useless. It doesn't guarantee you a job. Most employers, including me, do not care about degrees or grades or anything like that. We want to care that you love what you're doing, that you know what you're doing, in some cases that you have experience or that you're willing to learn. But people in general love learning and are curious. Like the key to success is curiosity. And I think masterclass.com is the perfect model for online learning. I'm really happy they're sponsoring this episode. If you're going to give a gift, give the gift of learning. Masterclass makes a meaningful gift this season for you and anyone on your list, because both of you can learn from the best to become your best, from leadership to effective communication to cooking. Let me tell you some of the classes I've taken. I've taken comedy from Steve Martin. I mean, can you believe I can take a class from Steve Martin on comedy, or Judd Apatow, my favorite comedy director? I could take an actual class from him on writing. Wolfgang Puck on cooking. Dan Brown on writing, or Judy Bloom, who's been on this podcast, on writing. By the way, Wolfgang Puck also has been on this podcast. It's such a pleasure. I try to take classes all the time from masterclass.com. And whether you're watching Masterclass on TV or listening in audio mode in the app or on their site, the quality speaks for itself. It's like these masterclass instructors are your own personal mentors that are going to help you reach the next level. How much would it cost to take one-on-one classes on comedy from Steve Martin or on chess from Gary Kasparov? You just wouldn't be able to do it. But it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. With a masterclass annual membership, it's $10 a month. Memberships start at $120 a year for unlimited access to one-on-one classes with all 180 plus masterclass instructors. So it's not just $120 for one instructor. You get all 180 plus masterclass instructors. Boost your confidence and find practical takeaways you can apply to your life and at work. And if you own a business or are a team leader, use Masterclass to empower and create future-ready employees and leaders. That's the real education in today's world. So this holiday season, you can give one annual membership and get one free at masterclass.com/JAS. JAS, of course, stands for the James Altucher Show. So right now you can get two memberships for the price of one at masterclass.com/JAS. Masterclass.com/JAS. Offer terms apply. NFTs are the latest hot thing being talked about in the crypto space. But there's something that's much more fascinating to me, which NFTs sort of touch on, DeFi sort of touches on, smart contracts touch on, which is securitized tokens. I think this is going to create a million different business models. The idea that I can essentially tokenize an asset, create a cryptocurrency that's backed by an asset. For instance, I can get a cryptocurrency that represents gold, for instance, and that itself could be sold into the crypto market. Or like one idea, I don't know why nobody's done yet. Let's say I just graduated college. I have $200,000 in student loan debt. I want to sell off 10% of my earnings for the next 10 years. The best way to do that is with the concepts and ideas behind Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, because then not only is it secure and there's it's legal, it's a contract around it, but if I get tired of James's potential for future earnings, I could sell that and buy the crypto for Anthony's potential for future earnings. And I could use, college students could use this to pay down their student loan debt. They can offer 10% of their future earnings, and boom, it's pay down their debt with it instead of borrowing more money. Why aren't more people? This seems to me like the biggest potential future business models in the crypto space.
Yeah, look, I think a lot of people are going to go try it, right? And frankly, I think that it's kind of like the late 90s, where if you go back to the late 90s and you really look at a lot of those ideas, they were all right. There was everything from food delivery to music streaming, et cetera. But we really didn't see them kind of come to fruition until a decade later, when those ended up being kind of these massive internet companies, right? And the ones that, as so far, have proven to be sustainable and durable, et cetera. Now, is that going to happen again here? I tend to think it's not going to be just the first one that figures out how to do some of that. It may take a couple of attempts, and people need to learn from each other, and users need to be ready to use that stuff, right? One of the big things is I talk a lot about like decentralized social media. Everyone wants to talk about decentralized social media right now around censorship and deplatforming, et cetera. How many users are going to leave YouTube, Twitter, or Facebook for decentralized YouTube, Twitter, or Facebook? Zero. Nobody's leaving because it's just decentralized. Instead, what you got to do is you got to build a 10x better product. It's got to have a better user experience. It's got to have a better network effect. It's got to have something that those other platforms don't have. And oh, by the way, it just happens to be decentralized. But if you lead with decentralization as the value prop, I just don't think people care about that, right? In terms of the mainstream.
That's really interesting because I guess you can create a network effect if content creators are to some extent miners also, so that the act of creating popular content also somehow it's like proof of content mining that generates more of the tokens of that social media.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a million different applications for this. I think the takeaway is just that as you enter this new world, you can't simply say, let me take the old model and apply it with this new technology. So, for example, you couldn't say, you know what we're going to do to disrupt the taxi industry? We're now going to allow you to send us a message on your smartphone, and then we're going to have a taxi come and get you. Like, that wouldn't have made much sense. It wouldn't have been very disruptive. Instead, the smartphones came with GPS and Uber was possible, and somebody figured out how to disrupt the legacy system. Same thing with online publishing. When the internet came along, there was a bunch of newspapers like, oh my God, this is amazing. Let's take our newspaper, let's create a copy of it at the copy machine, and then we're going to literally put like the PDF of the image up on a URL, and now anyone in the world can go and they can read the newspaper. Like, it's amazing. But actually, 90% of the value was the ability to test headlines, to have multiple people work on an article, to put multimedia in it, be able to edit in real time and kind of add to the story, the ability to distribute it differently, all these different things. And so what you have to understand is like, what does this technology unlock that previously was not possible? And then if you can leverage that new thing, that's usually what ultimately leads to the disruption.
Well, look at NFTs as an example, like the fact that a basketball team can sell tickets and then get royalties and when they're sold and resold and resold. That's a new technology that is not possible with paper tickets.
Correct. I think that is a good example. And I think that there's going to be people who, again, this is a market, right? So you're going to have millions of people around the world figuring out all kinds of crazy stuff. And frankly, 95% of it probably is worthless. Maybe 99, maybe 99.9% of what's tried is worthless. But that's how you get innovation, is all these people keep experimenting. And then ultimately the things that work is copied by everyone. And that's where you end up getting value, right? If you look again, let's say that Uber was one of, maybe not the first, but one of the first to use the GPS in the smartphone. How many apps now use the GPS in the smartphone? Hundreds, thousands, millions,
Yeah,
just everybody, right? And so when you think about that, it's really the experimentation almost leads to like a breakthrough or a discovery. And then once everyone agrees, oh, dang, that's valuable, it then immediately is copied by people across industries and used. And I think that's kind of where we're watching right now.
So what's next to unlock more value in Bitcoin? What do you see happening? El Salvador is the first country to really formally accept Bitcoin. This was a big milestone. What are some Michael Saylor at MicroStrategy became the first public company to make massive crypto purchases for their cash reserves. So that was a big milestone. If all of the Fortune 500 did that, crypto would probably be 200,000 already. So that's the beginning. What are some other milestones you see probably or most likely happening? If you were to guess, that will and as goes Bitcoin, so goes the crypto world. Like everything will follow.
Yeah, I think that for Bitcoin specifically, there's probably 4 or 5. One, you're going to get more adoption of what I call the institutional cohort. So you had retail or individual cohort first. Now you've got the institutional cohort showing up. That is companies, both public and private, continuing to adopt the asset as part of their treasury. You also have companies using it as a way to pay their employees. And then you have the financial institutions, whether they're directly investing or they're empowering their customers and users to invest as well. So you'll get deeper penetration in that institutional cohort. The second thing you're going to get is the state or the country cohort to start to adopt this as well. We already have one country that's made it legal tender. I think there will be many more over the next, kind of 18 to 24 months that follow. And so you'll start to get that penetration. That can include everything from buying it and putting it on their balance sheet, paying their employees from a government standpoint in Bitcoin, being able to accept it for taxes and fees, also trying to get in the hands of their citizens, right? There's all these different things, using it as a settlement for bilateral trade with other countries, et cetera. And so you'll get penetration in the institutional cohort, you'll get penetration in the country cohort. I think the third thing is you're going to continue to see this become more pervasive culturally, which is really, really important. So you're going to see more and more athletes and musicians and folks who have large audiences pay me in Bitcoin, talking about Bitcoin, participating in Bitcoin, et cetera, which continues, again, from a psychological standpoint, familiarizing people with it and kind of moving it from this asset that people still think is like on the dark web or something, and moves it more into the mainstream. And then the fourth thing, and probably the thing that I think is the most interesting, is that you're going to start to see mainstream adoption of the payment rails of Bitcoin. So Twitter recently just started to allow people now, anyone with an iOS device on Twitter, I can send you money across Twitter. And the way that that works is I send dollars, but they're actually using the Bitcoin payment rails. So right now I could go on Twitter, I could send you 20 US dollars, but my US dollars are turned into Bitcoin. It's sent across the Lightning Network. It's turned back from Bitcoin into dollars and then deposited into your account.
Why do they do it that way?
Because it ends up being instantaneous settlement and it's completely for free. So the second that now all of a sudden you drop the fees and you increase the speed, again, you get that efficiency, that scalability. Now you're able to do this anywhere in the world to anyone. It becomes a superior payment system, right? If I want to send you right now 1 penny, I can't send you 1 penny on other systems. I can only send it to you through the Bitcoin system. And the reason is because if I try to wire you a penny, the bank will tell me I'm not allowed to do it. I can't wire a penny from Western Union. Now, many people say, well, why do you have to do a penny, right? But ultimately, the reason why you got to do a penny is because there's all sorts of micro payments that you may want to do. You only want to pay 1 penny to read an article, or maybe I want to stream money to you. Every second, I'm going to send you a penny for doing some activity, right? When you reduce that barrier, it now becomes possible. But Visa, MasterCard, Stripe, all these guys, they can't process those transactions. Their entire business model is based on charging a fee, and that fee ends up being too much to allow for a penny transaction. But now with Bitcoin, you can actually do it, and that's where it becomes really, really interesting.
It's fascinating that, it's Twitter's allowing people to tip people who create valuable content. And what's fascinating about that is, it's never been done before, but often the people who monetize YouTube say are like, you already have 250,000 subscribers. So if you make a video and it gets 1 million views, you have, you're already set up to accept payment. But if somebody has no YouTube subscribers, but they make a video that gets 1 million views, they're not set up via YouTube probably to accept payments. They don't make any money on that. So if users are in control of who makes the money by tipping, then that's this is like a brand new business model for content creators, and it's a great thing that Twitter is starting it off.
I completely agree. And I think it's kudos to Jack Dorsey, the rest of the team there. Also to Strike, a company I'm invested in, Jack Mahler's. All these folks across those two companies and many other companies in the industry are all trying to push this forward. And ultimately what they're trying to do is they're trying to drive the cost and the friction of transacting a very small amount of value as close to zero as possible.
Well, Anthony, this is great. You're like the king of crypto content right now. And I should mention also, the Pompliano family is the first family of newsletter writing. So Joe Pompliano, who's the author of the great newsletter Huddle Up about the intersection of finance and sports, he's been on the podcast a couple times. Your wife, Polina, writes a great newsletter, The Profile, and she's coming on the podcast. I read her newsletter every day. In fact, you're the 3 newsletters I read every day. Yours, Joe's, and I'm not even interested in sports, but I love his stories about sports. And Polina always has great profiles of people from every industry all over history. I love her newsletter. So do you guys just sit around the Thanksgiving table talking about the newsletter business?
I wish that we did, but we don't. It's one of these things. I mean, look, you built a very large one yourself. I spent a lot of time writing a ton. And I do think that there's value in being able to clearly write, because if you can clearly write, that means you can clearly think. Right. Yeah. And that ultimately ends up being a skill set that what's the best way to develop clear thinking, clear writing? It's to do it. And so we just get more shots on goal on a weekly or monthly basis than most people. And so, it's proven to be a pretty valuable, kind of experience. But we'll keep doing it until one day we'll probably wake up and just say, okay, we're done. This wasn't we're not having fun anymore, and see you guys.
Have you considered other crypto style businesses, like it seems like they're handing out crypto hedge funds at the airport. Like have you thought about doing one of those?
I do a lot of investing, but no trading. So no hedge funds for me.
Yeah, good for you. So thanks again, Anthony. I hope you come on again, and you're always a welcome guest if you have anything you wanna share. And I will say in the intro and outros how to find your newsletter, but everybody should read it. It's really valuable, and if you're serious at all, or if you put even a single dollar into Bitcoin or any crypto, you got to read Anthony Pompliano's newsletter. So the Pomp Letter, I should say it's called. So thanks a lot, Anthony. It's great.
Absolutely. Well, I love the podcast. So thanks so much for having me.
No problem.
Your daily dose of gaming just got way more epic with the Snapdragon processor powering the Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra. Snapdragon processors give you the premium mobile experience that triggers your inner champion. Whenever you want, wherever you want. Get ready for edge-of-your-seat performance, advanced customizations, ultra-realistic graphics, and adrenaline-boosting speeds that have the power to move you in more ways than one. Follow us on Instagram at Snapdragon Official.